I'm Jason Pettigrew of Alternative Press. Welcome to episode number 4 of Cautionary Tales, the podcast where bands talk about their adventures, glorious and otherwise, navigating the music business. In a change of pace from our usual fare, Chris Tu from passionate Pittsburgh Punk's Anti-Flag came by to chat about how his band have kept the good fight going for 25 years. Now, the reason why I said change of pace is because, unlike a lot of bands on this show, Anti-Flag have done a great job navigating the choppy waters of the music business and its attendant culture. Unlike most bands, their tenure on a major label was positively amazing, entering a situation allowing them to not only make the records they wanted to make, but also allowing the band to make contributions to causes they felt strong about, whether it was supporting social justice nonprofits or buying a PA for a local DIY space. Chris also gave some insight about the changing face of punk and how the cards are stacked against new bands, how social media can make things difficult as hell, and how punk rock still has the ability to stir the hearts of many. He also lists the names of record label presidents his bands have flipped off, from Interscope to Honest Dons. If you've been questioning the true galvanizing power of punk rock, listen up right now. This podcast is primarily dedicated to the way the business of music gets in the way of bands being able to actually function. Anti-Flag have enjoyed a career of releasing their own records, aligning with respected indies, even entering in a deal with the Evil Empire RCA BMG for 2 records. Each situation has had its own great positive and probably some punishing lows. How good is your hindsight?
Yeah, so we are in this crazy fortunate position where we're still a band. And every day that we're still a band, we go, okay, those decisions weren't so bad. I think that even the ones that have failed ended up being the right decision. And most of that goes to Pat, our drummer. He is the most fiscally savvy person in rock and roll that I've ever come across. He finds ways for us to be paid, for us to live. Another side of that is that we do live in Pittsburgh, where traditionally, up until the last year or two, the cost of living has been one of the lowest in the country. So we're not from LA, we're not from New York, so we can survive because we, play a few shows here and there. Yeah, when you go through it all, the worst deal we probably signed is for the first record with New Red Archives. And that's just because they were kids, didn't know, and signed away. It was only a 1-record deal, which was a smart part of the puzzle. But he's been able, Nicky Garrett, who runs New Red, he sold that record to Cleopatra, and now we can't even touch it. So that's a little bit frustrating because it's a important part in the band's history. That record died for the government. And then from there we went to Go-Kart, and Go-Kart was facilitated well, but our options at the time were Go-Kart or Honest Dons, which was the subsidiary to Fat Records at the time. That's right. And I think we were one of the first bands to ever tell Mike no, because he said, I want to put you on Honest Dons. And we said, we want to be on Fat. And he said, you're not ready for Fat? And we said, go fuck yourself. and went to Go-Kart and, ended up selling 200,000 copies of that record on Go-Kart. Greg never paid us. Pat, being the savvy guy that he is, he said, okay, you have till this date to pay us. If you don't, we take the record back. And now we own that record. So I like to think that Greg took our money and put out a couple Unseen records. He put out the first 2 Menzingers records. Yeah. So you're welcome, world. But other than that, those were our RCA deal. It should be in a museum. I mean, the things we took from that company to get that done are unprecedented. Nobody else that I've ever met has had a major deal that looked the way ours looked. And, you've got to go back in time a bit and recognize that American Idiot wasn't out yet. There was no major voice commenting on the war in Iraq. And we saw it as an opportunity to position ourselves in some places that we wouldn't be positioned in.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And the company actually, a multinational corporation, actually got behind that record.
Yeah. Yeah. And
that would have been
2004 into 5.
2004. Okay.
Yeah.
We're talking about Bright Lights or Blood and Empire?
Blood and Empire was the first record, though.
Okay, that's right.
Yeah.
Wow, this is another question I'm going to ask a little bit further down the road about that. It's got nothing to do with the cash. But you actually, most people are just like, oh my God, we did the major label thing. We almost broke up. Blah,
Yeah.
da, 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 one wrong signature, and we gave away our publishing. You hear all of these horror stories.
Yeah.
But you're telling me that your 2-record deal on BMG was
It was
a
legit.
walk in the park.
Yeah. So here's what happened. We did the Terror State, which was our second record for Fat. So after we told Mike no for a New Kind of Army, we subsequently did Warped Tour for the first time in 2000. NoFX was on that Warped Tour. Green Day was on that Warped Tour. Weezer was there for a bit. It was a big deal. We were having some of the better shows of our lives at that time. There was still a vital punk rock scene that had infiltrated the Warped Tour, and we were reaping the benefits of that. Mike, I guess, realized the error of his ways and said, I want to do your next record on Fat. We thought that our lives were going to forever change. Now, if anything, this was a valuable lesson for us, because we thought, we signed to Fat, it's Anti-Flag, no effects, no use for name, good riddance. We're done. We can retire. We will be on the Mount Rushmore of
American punk, 21st century American.
Yeah. So we put out Underground Network, which was our first record for Fat, and nobody cared. And did worse than New Kind of Army did on Go-Kart. And that was a valuable lesson to us, that the label that's on the back of your record does not guarantee that anyone will give a shit about the music that you release in the world. And so when you get to that level where you're signing to the major and they tell you, no, marketing, exposure, these things, we told them to fuck off, because we knew that didn't mean anything. And so this conversation that bands and artists have with their audience, where they say, we are making this move to spread our message, that's not true. How do you know anyone's going to listen to your fucking message?
That was one of the things I was going to bring in there. It's like a lot of bands, they sign to the major label, think, oh yeah, exposure, but isn't it exasperatingly naive that somehow signed to a major label, a new audience is going to be invented for you?
Yeah, absolutely. And again,
and a lot of people take that bait, because it's like the weird.
Yeah. But
that's the big lie.
Literally, that's the entire conversation with a lot of those meetings, was that no. You don't need to worry about this, because the pie, your slice of the pie may be smaller, but the pie gets infinitely bigger. And then you tell Jimmy Iovine in your meeting with him to fuck off, and he goes, wow, that's never happened to me before. And he gets more interested, and then a bidding war happens, and it's fantastic.
Yeah, exactly. The bidding war.
So our story is simple. We did the Terror State, which was our second record for Fat and our biggest record to date. And of course that had a lot to do with the ramp up of the Iraq War, the amount of eyes that got turned on to political music because of George W. Bush and his polarization of the United States at the time. We're very well versed in politics being fashion. Right now, politics is in fashion again because of Donald Trump. Politics went out of fashion for Clinton, for Obama. You know, that's just the way it goes. Tom Morello worked on the Terror State. He played the record for Rick Rubin. Rick Rubin wanted to put our next record, which would have been for Blood and Empire, out on American. When Rick wants to sign your band, you then get a meeting with every major label, because they think that if Rick wants to do something and you are an A&R guy and you don't have a meeting with the person that Rick wants to work with, what's wrong with you? How do you not know what Rick knows? So we were taking meetings with people who had never heard of us. that was abundantly clear. One of those was the Jimmy Iovine meeting where we go into to Island and to the Universal building, and we're in this room with a lovely woman who's at his front desk, and then a bookshelf. And they pull a book, and literally the bookshelf moves, and you go behind the bookshelf, and that's where Jimmy Iovine's office is. And when you're 4 punk rock kids from Pittsburgh, that's not interesting.
but it's like, because you're from Pittsburgh, you're kind of like a wise guy already. You're just like, well, you believe this guy?
Yeah. Exactly. And then he proceeds.
Yin's people are crazy.
Yeah. So then we have one of the greatest moments in band being courted by major label history, where he's listening to the new Gwen Stefani album, Hollaback, because that's about to happen.
Oh, okay.
Then that song finishes as we enter. We have a meeting, and he says, "Oh, I know that you guys are political. I'm working on this record. I want you to hear it." And he plays us the new U2, Uno, Dos, Tres, Cuatro. Very loud. Yeah. Insanely loud. So loud that our drummer, Pat, raises his hand and says, "Can you turn it down?"
Nice.
So he asks him to turn it down. Jimmy is kind of horrified. He doesn't understand. He thought he had a rock and roll band in his sights.
Maybe it was because it was U2.
Yeah, we were unimpressed by the mystery door, the song choices he played for us, but we weren't really going to be on the label. We later found out that we had another meeting after, and they used Jimmy to stall us, to make us late for the other meeting, which, talk about, like,
yeah, that's about right. Yeah, but it is about right, though.
Yeah. It's a
like
real
an episode of Mad Men.
Yeah. So the curtain being pulled back on Oz was really fun. At that time.
Wow, that's just amazing. So, but it seems like for a bunch of guys from Pittsburgh, and I'm from further than Pittsburgh. I'm from the out of city limits, from Greensburg, Pennsylvania. You're not particularly sophisticated in the realms of music industry, New York, LA, that type of vibe. But you guys seem like you were going into these things with absolutely or very little naivete. Was there ever a point where there were some naivete that kind of impeded you?
So it was from me, because I loved Rick Rubin and I loved the Beastie Boys and I loved all of that stuff. But that was going to so this is insane. I can't believe we're talking about this. This is going to be in my tell-all.
I can be you in the book on tape. Okay.
So the reality of our situation was, Rick wanted to sign us to American. American didn't have a home because he was transitioning from Sony to what we thought at the time would be Universal. Okay. Universal had just usurped DreamWorks. So they had Rise Against, and they had AFI, and they had a lot of our friends there. That was their big selling point to us. Universal also had Jimmy, who we didn't particularly enjoy, if you remember. Okay. So the biggest thing that was weighing on Justin and Pat was that Rick had International Noise Conspiracy. And International Noise Conspiracy had a record done for 6 months and no home. And that purgatory that band was in it gave a lot of fear to them.
Yeah, that would definitely slow down your momentum.
Yeah. My naivete was, I just wanted to be around Rick Rubin. I mean, he was texting me, and he's like, "Yo, Jay-Z's in the studio today. He heard your track. He said, 'What's up?'" And when, I was 24 years old, something like that, I was like, this is the coolest shit in the world.
Right, of course.
Thankfully, Justin and Pat know about nothing. And none of the pop culture references, none of the things he pulled out
means a damn thing.
And so they would be like, "Yeah, who cares?" And I'd be like, "Guys, Slayer, the Beastie Boys," they were just like, we don't listen to any of that. We don't fucking care. And it was a lifesaver in the end, because we would have ended up on Universal. We would have got lost in that shuffle. In the end, we were able to negotiate that RCA deal, which was 2 records, was money for us to start a nonprofit organization, and have a parent company that had 2 organizations underneath of it, one of which was Military Free Zone, which combated a provision in the No Child Left Behind Act that students had to opt out from giving their information to military recruiters. When I went to school, we had to fill out a blue card, and that gave our information to the military. This was the other way around. We teamed up with a congressman in Seattle. We were able to get that law changed because we used RCA money and Sony money. They were so afraid of us. They wanted to do anything that we said to appease the deal, to make sure it got done, because they knew the Rick Rubin thing. They thought they were, on to whatever. Green Day, American Idiot had come out in that time. They were like, this is it. We've got,
That was the question I was going to ask.
Yeah.
I mean, was Dissent something that could be marketed?
Yeah.
What's the difference between, American Idiot and Blood and Empire? I mean, 2 years later, do you think the Suits were actually looking for a green payday?
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. I think so, and which is insanely beneficial to us. So when you talk about the timing of it, for us, the major made sense because there wasn't that voice in the mainstream yet. So we actually had the negotiations and actually went down the road. By the time we were making the deal, American Idiot was the #1 record. And so we were really close to, we had the songs, they had heard everything. We had This Is the End, we had Press Corps, we had $1 trillion, we had some of the more staple songs of Anti-Flag's life at that time. I think they thought, yeah, this is gonna work. We just leveraged that into every type of protection we could. And so when it was done, we did the 2 records for them, and we just walked away. And it was the interesting thing about all of it is I don't think we felt the backlash for signing to the major until the 2nd record. And that was because the internet wasn't nearly as powerful of a tool as it is now. And it took that long for the messaging to permeate through the punks that we had signed to a major. And, but, we wouldn't be here if it wasn't for that deal. We got a lot out of it. We were able to build the studio in Pittsburgh with the money that we got from them. And subsequently, we recorded 2 of our last records by ourselves because of that money. And we're still afloat because we squeezed BMG like a fucking lemon. And they were signing, they had us and the American Idols at the time.
Oh.
I had no problem with taking their money. And
sure, absolutely.
Yeah. We felt what we were saying was important, and we still do. And I think that led us to really just put our heads down and say, if this is the dance we have to do to have them dog ear a percentage of that money to us. Yeah. And if you looked at the byline of the deal, they lost.
Well, so after 2 records,
yeah,
did you walk, or did they say no? Did they guys guys, please, we want you? Did they chase you with the pen and the new contract for the re-up, or they just say, we're glad to be rid of you? A
little bit of both. So we had an A&R guy there who wanted to keep us, who wanted to do the next record. We would have had to negotiate a whole new deal. That deal would have been terrible. Of course. And so we were just like, nah, this doesn't make any sense to us. Everyone else at the label had been fired. It was post the merger, so we had no connection to anyone there at that time, other than the A&R guy. And a really, interesting byproduct of it is that we retained the vinyl rights for those 2 records.
Oh, wow, okay.
And that's just another example of how out of touch these people were. I mean, none of them thought you could sell an LP. And
but if you're in a punk rock band, it seems like the punks are more down with vinyl records than they are 5-inch aluminum discs.
Yeah, of course. And nobody said, wait, this is a band that, let's look at their sound scan. And they sell a lot of LPs.
Yeah,
So again, I think they were just blinded by the Rick thing. And they were genuinely afraid of us. Not in a sense that they thought we were going to beat them up. They just didn't want to have the arguments. And we had such protections built into the deal that they just would say, okay. And there was a woman there who was the lawyer at the label who was actually like very cool and loved the band. And so she'd be like, guys, I just pushed this through for you.
Oh, wow.
And those are, you know, good predicaments to be in.
Wow, that's really amazing. I don't think the term gaming the system is, well, maybe on the vinyl rights thing, maybe you're kind of like, nobody wants this dumb format.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, and we sold 10,000 LPs through AF Records. And again, that's the reason why we put out the Homeless Gospel Choir record last year. Why you know, that's where that money comes from. People don't, there's not a, there's not a bucket. You know, the money's got to come from somewhere.
What?
So,
there's no ocean. Yeah. There's no tributary near the Monongahela River where you can just like get some pull the truck up, get some buckets like spring water or something like that. No buckets of money.
It was a bit of a rock and roll swindle, and it's one we're proud of. You know, was there a lot of conflict and discussion that, you know, RCA was once owned by GE and GE manufactures weapons? You know, there's a lot of those discussions. Yes, it wasn't a decision we took lightly at all. But the protections of the deal were that we were able to make the records we wanted to make. And they were going to give us, you know, dumb shit. Like, you know, I got $3,000 from Sony to put a PA in the DIY venue in Pittsburgh. Like,
oh, Mr. Roboto?
Yeah.
Okay. Mr. Roboto project, yeah.
And, you know, just things like that where Justin got money for the Thomas Merton Center, which is an organization in Pittsburgh. You know, like, it just is it was a no-brainer once the paper was laid out in front of us. And we had a major label contract that was like 25 pages long too, which they're typically much longer.
Yeah, exactly.
Hundreds, you know. So we were fairly protected in that deal, and subsequently, you know, some of our worst deals have been with the indies. You know.
How does that happen? I can understand the New Red Archives thing because young people just supporting the scene, man.
Yeah.
And they just really believe in something, but they really don't have any type of inherent knowledge of mechanicals
and the biggest thing, the biggest mistake was the rights never returned to us in the deal. Whereas in every other deal, the rights were going to return to us. And some of those Fat records are going to be ours again soon and all that kind of stuff. And then we'll have to talk with them. We still have a great relationship with Fat. So if they wanted to keep them, I'm sure we'd allow them to have them. So it's just about who does business correctly.
Doing business. Well, is it hard to be punk in 2018? Is there participation in community and support? Red buying stuff, from shirts to 7 inches to physical media and all that. Because we live in, like I was saying briefly off mic about the concept of mid to late 80s punk / hardcore in America and all that. Completely different ball game. Culturally a different thing now, psychically a different thing, financially a different thing. Has it gotten better or worse being in a punk rock band in 2018? Well, and I'm asking you this simply because you're not elder statesman, but you're qualified statesman to talk about this in great detail. Yeah.
So there's many facets to that. One being it's changing still, like by the minute. It's going to change by the time I leave this fucking room. I think that the thing that we don't think about is late 80s, early 90s punk rock. When those bands sold 3,000 7-inches, we thought they were Kiss. And now, we, in the digital age, we're selling 5,000 copies of the Homeless Gospel Choir record out of AF Records. And we're like, how do we keep moving this needle? I think that there is a vast discrepancy between the ferocity that surrounded punk rock then, that surrounds it now. There are a few bands that, will be like blips on the radars of having that ferocity. I would say Anti-Flag had a really important moment in the late 90s, early aughts where that happened. AFI had one. You're seeing what happened with Code Orange now. Touche Amore had one just a few years back where there is a cult built around that. And that's the way every punk band was back then. When you went to those shows, it felt important and it felt heavy and it felt like this might be the last time I ever see this, and because the venues were getting shut down, because the scene couldn't support the speed at which it was growing, and there was a lot of levity to those moments. Now, because what did you call it? Qualified statesman? Because of us being the qualified statesman that we are, and other bands like us, we've built an infrastructure for all of these bands. And there is a quote-unquote business model for how to be a punk rock band in 2004, 5, 6, 7, 8, The major thing that happened that we just talked about, no one ever saw that coming. I mean, I didn't think that anyone was going to take us serious to that level. But when we were going out with Rise Against and Against Me and all of those bands in 2003 and 4, we had an agenda. It was an anti-war movement that we were all part of. So those are the kind of the spikes in the history of the punk rock that I see that we're around. Can you survive being a brand new band now? I don't know. I mean, I really don't envy bands that are starting now, and even like a band like the Menzingers, who is ultimately on another planet right now, as far as like their live draw, people that are tuned into their records, that are listening to it digitally and things like that. They won't live in a time when they could sell 250,000 copies of their record like we did. That just doesn't happen, and because of that, they're slowly starting to inch their way into that like European festival world and American festival world. But for some reason, when you go to the summer in Europe, it's still NoFX, Anti-Flag, you know what I mean? Like,
exactly.
So
it's almost Warped Tour.
Yeah.
Which is no longer going to be with us after this summer. Yeah.
And then you look at like Punk's Not Dead that he did. Like, speaking of Kevin and
Warped that's Tour, right. Yeah.
And it's 30,000 tickets. Like, why are people giving up on this? like there's room for it, and then there's room to cultivate new artists around it. So that's a frustrating part of the American world to me, and more of my heart goes out to new bands who don't get those opportunities, especially with something like Warped Tour going away. I don't think it's a tour for everyone. There are not a lot of bands that translate well to 1 p.m. In 100-degree heat outside.
Yes, that's true.
But for everyone that doesn't, there's a My Chemical Romance that does. Or, and I think that the reason that band did what it did was when the fervor was there, they went on stage and they delivered. And they were able to connect with that audience. And that audience was then invested in them further than, that's a song on the radio, I heard it and I like it, So it's kind of a bummer conversation for me to talk about what it's like to be a new punk rock band.
I'm hearing stories about how actually it is hard for a new punk band or a hardcore band to get gigs in major cities like New York and LA, which would to me be, punk rock bastions.
Yeah,
given the history of the whole genre and everything.
But people don't go to shows, man.
And that's what I'm wondering. I'm like, are we seeing punk communities reduced down to Facebook groups as opposed to phone numbers on the back pages of MRR? Where, dude, I can get you a gig in this basement or something like that. Yeah. Is it just really? Is it like gym class where showing up is half your grade?
No. So there's two worlds. The basement scene is still thriving, and it's still there.
Sure, yeah.
And unfortunately, because of the fact that there are punk rock bands with large success, there's this belief that every band that starts can do that. And what I'm getting at is that the system of filtering through isn't necessarily there anymore. There are dividing lines. And maybe it's because of the internet, or maybe it's because of what the DIY scene is feeling right now. But it is very hard to transition from the DIY scene to a club the way it was, fuck man, when we toured in 2000, we would play a house one night and play a venue in a city that people knew us. You know what I mean? Like, you just bounced around. You had a foot in all the worlds, and there was no discussion about it. The internet making music feel trivial and free and unimportant has led to a lack of investment when people see and interact with music. And that's the hardest thing, I think, is that used to be when you played a house show and there was 100 people there at the house show, everyone put $1 in and you got gas money in it. Now everyone's buying beer, everyone's buying whatever, because music has no value. Even though the party's built around it and the whole thing is because of the show, it just doesn't.
It's furniture.
Yeah. And so that's what I feel like new bands have the hardest time with, is that their art is looked at culturally, not just by young people. Now, fucking my stepdad just downloads the Bruce Springsteen record, and you're just like,
doesn't he listen to WDVE like everybody else?
And so it is a cultural phenomenon that music is useless and free. How do we change that?
I don't know. I ask you too, who allowed Apple, go, everybody who has iTunes, put our record on there for free.
Yeah.
That I do see this as the trivialization of music. And if you've grown up with that, that's just kind of that's like a rough thing for me. It's just like, I don't buy records anymore. I pay $10 a month and I can get more records I could ever listen to in my single, and I'm just.
So then we can talk about a few things. One, that's why the LP coming back has levity and importance. Two, why the fuck are record labels saying, okay, we're only going to sell 10,000 pieces of this. Let's make it as cheap as possible. Let's make the booklet nothing. Why are we not rewarding the audience who's left?
Absolutely.
And that's my biggest frustration.
Value added.
Yeah. And everything is, okay, well, and on some level we're guilty of this too, but that's also the label that we're currently on, where they're like, okay, we're gonna make 500 copies of this deluxe one, and and I'm like, man, these are people that are actually committed to the art we're making, and their reward for that commitment is you have to pay more to get more. This seems insane to me. So that's the conversation that we're having all the time, and why we're trying to come out with new things. And obviously Spotify is the new K-Rock. So you want to get on this playlist because that's like getting an ad to this radio station or whatever. But the difference is people were choosing to listen to one, and now one is just everything in the world is right there at my fingertip, and my emotional investment into it is a lot less than it used to be.
Like paying your gas bill.
Yeah.
I mean, you like the heat, but oh well, it's something I do.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, there's another thing. also getting about the internet, because I read this today before while I was planning our chat, and I don't know, have you heard about Funny or Die? Funny or Die basically just cut its entire staff.
I did hear about this. Yeah.
And I guess one of the directors is saying that it's the whole Facebook algorithm thing, and Facebook wants you to put all your really cool stuff on there, but they don't do anything to send that traffic back to you so you can monetize that, and then they want you, of course, to pay. Facebook wants you to pay for that, for the privilege of them hosting your stuff exclusively, and that whole type of thing. That's, I mean, that's got to be hard for bands. What is, I mean, also, I mean, I guess what's Alternative Press's motivation for like having a band come in here and do an acoustic set to put it up on Facebook, and then like nobody goes to altpress.com.
Yeah.
I mean, essentially, and that affects so many different, that affects publishers of all sorts of things. And, obviously there's the other thing where, because the algorithm, how many times, I don't know, I'm sure you get it. There's other big bands who've told me about it, where they do things like, they will see fans on Twitter or something, and they'll say, "Why aren't you coming to my town?" It's like, dude, we were in your town 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
Is it because the Facebook algorithm makes sure that maybe if you've got 10,000 fans on Facebook, only maybe 1/7 of those people are seeing it?
Yeah, so a lot of this stuff does elude us, but we do our best to navigate it the best we can. I find that the thing that's crazy, is that, we're on tour right now, and we're paying money to advertise our tour on Facebook all the time. And you're just like, oh, okay, well, that's where we're at. like if you want people to see your dates, you've got to give Facebook money so that they can see your dates. And then when they do see it, literally the alt-right is there commenting on every single one of our posts saying,
oh, yeah.
Yeah. And so to me, it's just it's a vacuum of negativity. And I'm hopeful that we'll find a way to inch away from it. And maybe it comes from us internally in the band being like, this just doesn't make any sense. But like, we have a show tomorrow, right, in Pittsburgh, and the Facebook ad for it that the venue put out, the first comment is, "I hope the venue collapses on these cucks," and then you're just like, man, this is such an incredible time to be alive. Yeah. Because
can I see the passport of the person who posted that? Was it a bot?
Yeah, exactly.
Or are you out trying to beat moose and squirrel? That's old reference for people very old reference to Rocky and Bullwinkle. Google that shit. I ain't got time to explain it.
But it's so crazy to me that the infiltration of the bot thing and all of that is like because we're a political band, the brunt of our thing, I guarantee you that the word Killary is one of the top commented things on every anti-flag Facebook post we've done. And as if to say that if Hillary Clinton won the election, we were going to write a record called Flowers and Puppies, Yay, She Won. Like,
yeah, exactly.
Who doesn't
Produced by
know?
Justin Timberlake.
Yeah. The 25 years of social commentary on political activism and social and economic justice goes out the window in this new world of alt-right versus non. And which is why the shows to me have been so therapeutic. That's where even if, like last night was one of our smaller shows, we played in Nashville. Last time we headlined a show in Nashville, we played a record store in '98. And so do that.
Wow.
So there was 300 people there in the room that holds 600, which I thought was pretty good. But it's pretty light, the people and the communication and just the collective sigh of relief of being in a room where none of that shit existed for an hour or two, like, that's the only thing that's getting me through living in the digital age. Because it doesn't matter what we post or what we do, there is some version of racism or xenophobia or
chauvinism.
Yeah, and it's just right there, immediately right there. And that shit wears on you. I mean, that's the same conversation we were having about the internet before when we were talking about cyberbullying and all of that stuff. Like it does wear on you to have conversations with actual white supremacists. Like, you know, going back to talking about the 80s, when the kid wore the swastika shirt to the show, he got his ass kicked and he was thrown out the door. And then
Sid Vicious wore
exactly. But now we're talking about white supremacists and fascists that have jobs hiring people that are all the way up into the fucking White House. So, of course, they're emboldened and they're coming at us from every angle they have because they feel like they have power for once in their lives. So that, to me, is a far greater important conversation and discussion that we should be having rather than, you know, do people care about the music that I'm creating anymore, you know? I'm hopeful that they do, because then it gives us the affordability to go out on the road and to share these discussions. But at the same time, it's the only thing I know how to do. And thankfully, we've been able to have a foot in each world our entire band's life. We never got too big. We never got too small. So if somebody says you have to be in a van for 2 weeks, we can be in a van. We don't have to be in a bus. We can tour as cost effectively as possible. We know how to operate our band as effectively and precisely as we can so that it's not wasteful and it's not exploitative. And I'm hopeful that now that the devaluation of music being what it is, that will teach young people who are creating art for the first time those lessons. The same lessons we had back when selling 3,000 records was...
3,007 inches.
Yeah, was the biggest thing.
Specify that.
Yeah.
7 inches. Has punk rock gotten better in the era of Trump?
It's still too early. I think that I think that the conversation is always, you know, and this was like the big thing, you know, Trump's gonna make punk great again, you know. I just think it's gonna make people find punk because they're looking for punk, and there's always been great punk rock music being created regardless of who the president is. I do think that the emboldening of fascism is going to make the anti-fascist movement have greater fervor to it. And to me, that's been my connection to punk rock, is music that's about social and economic justice and fighting bigotry. So even when it's a band like Green Day, their ethos are still end racism and sexism and blah, 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 and here's a song that fucking you can sing all day. You know what I mean? Like, so I think that it just focuses the telescope on punk rock music, and there are tremendous bands in all forms of the scene, whether it's the DIY basement scene to the club scene to larger punk rock bands that will be energized by the fight that they have in front of them, and that in turn will make for some really cool art, I think.
Where are the car and house keys clenched between the fingers of the fist to drive that point home?
Yeah.
I mean,
so if we just look at our most recent history, because that's the only thing we can do is reflect on where we were. It wasn't, George Bush was elected in 2000. There was people in the streets protesting his election because of the 600 votes in Florida and whether or not it was a just American election. It wasn't until the Iraq War in 2003 that you had 1 million people in the streets over and over and over again. And then 2004, the ramp up that fall, that's when you got Rock Against Bush, that's when you got all of these things. I mean, that's a long time. If you look at the Women's March being on the day after Trump was elected, I would say we're ahead of schedule.
Yeah.
So I think
women get shit done.
Yeah, and that's absolutely true. And I think that's why you see so many. You know, you had Sharptooth in here today. There's a female punk rock band that is incredible. Downtown Boys, War on Women. You know, the list goes on and on of pro queer, pro women, activist punk rock music. Problem is, the same struggle to get you out of the fucking house to come to the punk rock show exists. Extrapolate at times 50 to get out in the street and confront white supremacy on a daily basis. Yeah. Look at yourself as two straight white males sitting having a conversation. What's the work that we need to do on ourselves to get this done? And I think that's where that wheel of history turning is a slower turn than maybe we want it to be. But I am undoubtedly convinced that Donald Trump and his polarization of the country will lead to positivity. I think that it might not happen in our lifetimes, but people will look back on this time and say, what? They did what? They allowed what to happen? They allowed Charlottesville to happen. They allowed this proposed military parade to happen. All of this shit. You know, whether it's fucking new and renewable energy shifting the playing field, and our commitment to the Saudis and the Middle East forever changing, thus the global economy shifts, thus our importance on foreign leaders and domestic leaders that can negotiate with this backwards fucked up system that we have. Once that changes, I think that the playing field for all of that is a lot different. But it's going to take a huge paradigm shift like that before.
Massive.
Yeah.
Seemingly.
Yeah. Which is okay. It will discomfort some. But the redistribution of wealth needs to happen. It's that same thing you're talking about with Funny or Die and all of this stuff. Yeah, the act of having to cut those jobs really fucking sucks because of what it was. But I'm still curious to know what the business is making. And it's a whole that they have, you know what I mean? Like, are they just like, well, everybody needs 20% growth, so everybody's fired? Or is it, no, our business is hemorrhaging money. We need to make these cuts. Because if you look at the top 1%, they're continuing to make endless amounts of money. But the lower half of, or the lower 99% of our world is in great danger of being in great poverty. And so how do we figure that out? That's a huge conversation that I'm hopeful that people much smarter than myself are going to have soon.
It sure needs to happen. I know right now there are people I know who have been really lifelong pacifists who have like gone into their savings and bought guns.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
I mean, it's just kind of, they still.
Here's this problem with that.
You know, it's just the emotional context and watching things happen to them. And I think it was one of the Occupy protests, mm-hmm. where there was some building, I don't know, and they actually hung up signs in the office, like on the windows that said 1%, and then we're just like flipping people off, and just like pointing and laughing and all that stuff. And there are people who are responding to that, just saying like, tomorrow I'm buying a high-powered rifle.
Yeah. So here's my problem with the gun thing.
I mean, these are people. It's not like we're it's my right to bear arms.
No.
It's about feeling trapped and wanting to get maybe not even revenge as much as it is justice. And when you're using words like justice, coming from a middle-aged guy who works at a rock magazine, justice means something different from some guy who has to figure out how to feed his wife and 2 kids.
Absolutely, except our separation from the powerful is only demonstrated when everyone can see how out of touch the powerful is. If you look at Selma, if you look at police brutality during the civil rights movements, then that detachment from reality that the powerful was imposing, that's what shifted the public discourse. I don't know anyone, even in my friends who are pacifists, who are saying, well, I'm going to go buy a gun because this shit's getting out of control. When they're face to face with violence, I don't know how many of them can actually pull a trigger. And to me, I take great solace in that, because that is where that visualization of how out of touch the powerful are, when you see them. And this is what the Black Lives Matter movement is about. This is right. What the 110 folks who were murdered in January alone by the police, this is where their justice will come from, is that this continual visualization of how out of touch the powerful are with the populace. That is changing young people. That's why when you go to a Bernie Sanders rally, much like the two that I went to, it looks like you're at the Warped Tour in 2000. And there's 14-year-olds with puffy paint on their shirt, and they are there to celebrate humanity. And it feels like that's where our future lies. It lies with these people who are being activated and engaged and care about more than just themselves. They have empathy. It is really hard for that middle-aged person who's trying to feed his kids to have empathy for folks dealing with transgender bathroom issues and things like that, because they're so focused on their world right now. But there's more out there than just your world. And when we live in a society, the one that we currently do, that creates enough wealth for all of us to live healthy and long lives, and we're not being given that opportunity, that's that same visualization of the powerful being so out of touch and maintaining their own wealth just to carry on their bloodline and keep that wealth inside their bloodline. So I don't know what it's going to take for us to go and paint the White House black and have the pitchforks and be in the streets calling for it. But
there was an Insane Clown Posse fan on Twitter was actually changed his screen name to "Make Guillotines Great Again."
Yeah.
Damn, that was good, dude. Whoever you are, that was great.
Yeah. So
I don't know. I guess let me whip this back up around again. Can punk rock and the punk rock community, in whatever form, whatever subgenre, whatever cultures, can it still be that
catalyst?
Can it still be the catalyst? Can it be the canary in the coal mine? Can it be the pH balance? Can it be the CO2 alert for culture?
So I guess we kind of, I'll say this. Now that we've reached whatever qualified statesman status, we are touring every day and meeting people who are telling us, we met a guy who's a federal judge in Wisconsin, two kids the other day who work for the ACLU, social workers daily that we meet, who were introduced to this idea of empathy via punk rock. Yes, this music has the ability to change the world because it's changing people's lives, and those people are doing the hard work to change the immediacy of the world around them. I have to believe in that. I'm an eternal optimist. I wouldn't make music and art the way that it's created if I didn't believe that. As difficult as it is sometimes, I find that conversations like this are when it has the most weight to it, when it feels like, oh fuck, we're losing. But then tonight we're going to play a show, and I guarantee you that we meet a handful of people who talk to us about their indoctrination into empathy and punk rock and simple idea of caring about more than just themselves. And that is going to allow me the ability to go on to the next one. And that's what we're all searching for right now. because the pendulum needs to shift, and it will shift. And I stopped caring a long time ago if my picture was in the dictionary next to the word revolution. I used to dream about that, and yeah, I'm gonna be. Who gives a fuck about me? But as long as when the history books are written, we can reflect back, be on the right side of that history. We should be trying to live that way right now.